The parish church of St Lawrence, Abbots Langley in Hertfordshire, was erected and dedicated to St Lawrence the Martyr in 1154. It is clear from Domesday records that a Saxon church preceded the Norman building and that the site has been a major Christian burial ground for over 1,000 years. The churchyard contains some notable graves and memorials. James Fitzjames was born on the 27th of July 1813, the illegitimate son of diplomat Sir James Gambier, a relative of the Botham family, who lived in the country house of Hazelwood. At the age of 2, James was adopted by the Reverend Robert and Louisa Conyngham, who lived in the manor house Abbots Langley. His childhood in Abbots Langley with his adoptive parents and their son William Conyngham was a happy one. James studied at Eton, and at the age of 12 he joined the Royal Navy, where his promotion was rapid. In 1845 he was appointed captain of HMS Erebus on the Franklin expedition to find a route through the Northwest Passage from Baffin Bay to the Beaufort Sea. The expedition became icebound for 2 years, and in 1847 the ships were abandoned, and the officers and crew perished on their perilous journey south in a failed attempt to escape the ice. The wrecks of HMS Terror and Erebus were discovered on the seabed in 2014 and 2016. And in 1992, the remains of at least 13 of Franklin's sailors were found scattered on the surface in Terror Bay on King William Island. One of the bones has recently been proved by DNA analysis to be that of James Fitzjames. The remains of his adoptive father, the Reverend Robert Conyngham, were buried alongside a chestnut tree in St Lawrence Churchyard. His memorial stone and a chestnut tree have not survived, but records confirm that his burial is within this part of the churchyard. The inscription on this memorial commemorates Thomas Stevenson, the youngest son of Leonard and Elizabeth Stevenson of Nash Mills. Thomas died aged 24 on the 7th of February 1880 on return voyage from Australia and was buried at sea. His father Leonard was chief engineer at John Dickinson's paper mills and was responsible for designing and maintaining the paper-making machinery. Thomas began work in his father's machine shop, but shortly afterwards became a ship's engineer on the SS Norfolk, which traded between London, Australia and New Zealand. On a home voyage in 1880, Leonard died of heat exhaustion and was buried at sea in the Indian Ocean between Oman and the Maldives. Sir John Evans was a nephew and partner of John Dickinson and took over the running of the business on John Dickinson's death in 1869. He lived in Nash Mills House, which today has been converted into apartments. He retired from active management of John Dickinson's in 1885 to focus on his hobby and passion for archaeology. He became a Fellow of the Royal Society in 1864, a member of the London Geological Society in 1874, and High Sheriff of Hertfordshire in 1881. He was awarded the Geological Society's Lyell Medal in 1880 for his pioneering archaeological works of literature. He died in 1908, and alongside him lie the remains of his son, Sir Arthur Evans, who died in July 1941. He was also a pioneering archaeologist who was famous for his excavations of the Minoan civilization in Knossos on the Greek island of Crete. These are the family graves of the Armstrongs, designed by Thomas Armstrong. Thomas was a respected artist, exhibiting at the Royal Academy between 1865 and 1877, later becoming governor of the gallery. Between 1881 and 1898, he was Director for Art at the South Kensington Museum, now the Victoria and Albert Museum, and was a prominent supporter of the arts and crafts movement. In 1890, Thomas Armstrong and his family moved into the Abbots House in St Lawrence Close, Abbots Langley. He died on the 25th of April, 1911. Elvira de Orihuela was born in New York on the 23rd of September 1870. She was the only daughter of Aline Lefebvre, who at the age of 17 eloped with her Spanish tutor, Thomas de Orihuela. 5 years later, Thomas died, and the family moved to Britain, where Elvira married Henry William Henderson. Henry was the brother of Alexander Henderson, the first Lord Farringdon, and together they had a stockbroking business, financing railway enterprises in Spain, Cuba, and Argentina. Henry and Elvira lived in Prince's Gardens, Kensington, with their 4 children, and in 1898 they rented a weekend retreat at Surge Hill, where they played an active part in the village affairs of Bedmond and Abbots Langley. On the 18th of December 1901, at the age of 31, Elvira Henderson died in childbirth at her Kensington home, and her body was brought by rail to Abbots Langley, where she was buried in St Lawrence Churchyard. In 1902, Henry Henderson underwrote the cost of providing a village hall and gifted it to the community of Abbots Langley in memory of his wife Elvira. Today it is called the Henderson Hub, and it includes Elvira's cafe and bar, where residents can relax with refreshments. Elvira's low rectangular tomb in Art Nouveau style was designed by the world-renowned artist Sir George Frampton, who amongst other works was commissioned by J. M. Barrie to produce this sculpture of Peter Pan in Kensington Gardens. Elvira and Henry Henderson had 4 children, Aline, Maud, Violet and Ronald, who was born in 1893. He married Marjorie Garrard, one of 6 daughters of Sebastian Garrard, who owned the Crown Jewellers Garrards in Mayfair. Ronald was a career soldier who served as a lieutenant in the First World War and as a major in the Second World War. He died on the 12th of February 1956 and is buried in St Lawrence Churchyard near his mother's tomb. There are many military graves in the churchyard, including that of Lieutenant Colonel Kenneth John Campbell of Stracher, the 23rd chief of the MacArthur Campbells, a clan that goes back hundreds of years and whose ancestors include the Duke of Argyll and John Campbell of Stracher, who fought at Culloden in 1746. After his military career, Kenneth retired to Bedmond and died in 1965. There are several Commonwealth war graves, including that of William George Baldwin, who served in the Royal Air Force. He was wounded in France and discharged to be treated at home in Abbots Langley. He died on the 2nd of June 1919 after the war had ended and was buried in St Lawrence Churchyard and is commemorated on the War Memorial. Harold Ostler of the Bedfordshire Regiment died of illness on the 18th of May 1918, 10 months after being discharged from the army. He had contracted tuberculosis while serving and admitted to hospital several times whilst based in Felixstowe. He is also commemorated on the War Memorial. Oliver Maitland was billeted in Abbots Langley, where he spent 6 months training with the Post Office Rifles. It is thought that he was taken ill during one of the battalion's route marches and tragically died of pneumonia in Watford Hospital on the 25th of February 1915. George Edward Coxhill of the Royal Army Medical Corps was discharged wounded in April 1918 and died some 2 years later at home after the war had ended. He is also commemorated on the War Memorial. E. H. Lowe was a glider pilot serving with the Army Air Corps during the Second World War. He died on the 4th of May 1944, aged 23. Violet Carnegie, the youngest daughter of Elvira and Henry Henderson, was treasurer of the War Memorial Committee, and she unveiled the memorial on the 21st of December 1920. Many of the servicemen of Abbots Langley parish who fought and died in the First World War are inscribed on the memorial, and those who died in the Second World War have been added. 2025 marks the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II, and the community of Abbots Langley will be commemorating this milestone with a number of events. These will include a book launch, exhibitions, a war walk, bell ringing, a picnic in the park, and the lighting of the Manor House beacon. To find out more about the history of Abbots Langley and the V80 commemorations, go to allhs.org.uk and follow the links.